Feeling overwhelmed by the challenges of being a single parent? You are not alone. Welcome to Single Parent Reset, the podcast that helps you navigate the ups and downs of single parenthood and find the balance that you deserve. Whether you're a single parent, co-parent or solo parent, this is the show for you. I'm Orla and I'm a life coach for single parents and a single parent myself. I know how hard it can be, but I believe every single parent has the strength to create a life that they are proud of. For more information about me and the work that I do, please visit my website solascoaching.com. That is SOLAS coaching.com. In each episode of this podcast, we'll be shining a light on the unique struggles single parents face and cover the aspects of being a single parent that are often overlooked and left unspoken. I'll be sharing actionable steps to help you overcome these challenges and find more calm and fulfillment in your life. Single Parent Reset is your weekly opportunity to gain a fresh perspective, take back control, and feel more in charge of your journey. In today's episode, I am joined by the most amazing Betsy Cornwell. Betsy is a best-selling author and also the founder of the Old Knitting Factory, which I'm going to let Betsy tell you about because it is the most incredible initiative that she is running in the West Coast of Ireland. This conversation is all about Betsy and her amazing journey to getting the Old Knitting Factory running and everything else that's in between. She's written a memoir about her life, which is such a good read. Listen to this conversation now where we talk all things single parenthood and everything else in between. I'm going to stop talking because honestly, you're going to want to dive right into this episode. Betsy, hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh my God, thank you so much for coming. I am beyond excited. I have been all week thinking, okay, the day's coming. We're going to be speaking to Betsy soon. So I jumped out of bed today, like, yes, today's the day. So please, can you please tell the listeners of Single Parent Reset just a little bit about you to help them understand why I am bouncing in my chair right now. So excited to speak to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I'm really excited to be here. I'm a single parent myself. I'm really passionate about supporting single parents. And well, I am a New York Times bestselling author, mostly of fantasy and historical novels for young people. But my first memoir, my first nonfiction book, my first adult book is coming out this fall. It's called Ring of Salt, and I did send it to you a little while ago. So we're going to be talking about my book a little bit, and this is one of the first podcasts I'm doing to talk about the book, which I'm very excited about. So, it's basically the story of I'm American, as you can hear from my voice, but how I moved to Ireland and got into and eventually out of an emotionally abusive marriage, and then how I sort of found myself again in single motherhood. And it's also about a business project that I am still working on called the Old Knitting Factory, which we can get into, I'm sure. So
Amazing. Yeah. So I think the fact you've even had the time to write a book while being a single parent is just incredible. And the story that you tell in it is so inspiring. And I'd love to know from you, first of all, what brought you to spur you on to write this memoir?
absolutely. Well, I think so. I think I'm lucky. You know, people always say it's amazing to write a book while single parenting, and I think it's amazing to get anything done as a single parent. I'm lucky in that way that I was already making a living as a writer by the time I became a single parent. So I think I saw writing books as my best chance to support myself and my child. And this book was a dream that I've had for the last 7 years. And my kid is now 8. I split up with his dad when he was 1. So, for this whole time, we briefly sort of had a brush with homelessness. We were dealing with housing insecurity for a while. There's a big housing crisis in Ireland, as there is in many parts of the world. I really struggled to find us a stable home, and I started to fantasize about home ownership really intensely. But as a self-employed, low-income immigrant single parent, it was very unlikely that anyone was going to offer me a mortgage. So I had this sort of half-baked idea that I could find a strange old building in Ireland that nobody else wanted and write a book about it. And then I could sell the book in order to buy the house. And the farther away I get from that having worked, the more it seems like a completely crazy idea, But it did work. And so this book that's coming out is the book I wrote to find a house for myself and my kid. And so it's different from my other books in that it really came out of a search for survival. It was a survival tool. And it's my first nonfiction project. It's my first book about myself rather than about, fairies and that kind of thing. And so it feels very intimate and vulnerable now that it's coming out. But in a way that I think I didn't fully anticipate while I was writing it. But I'm very proud of it. And I think being vulnerable and honest with people about the experience of single parenthood and leaving abuse was one of the goals I had in the book all along, because I think, I want the book to feel like a home for the reader, as well as being a book that provided a physical home for myself and my kid. And I think to invite a reader into that space, you have to be honest and vulnerable with them. And so I really hope that that's what the book is doing.
Yeah, I love the idea of a book creating a home, because I think it is a book you could go back to time and time again once you've read it and pick up different sections of your journey, because they're all so inspiring and so raw and honest as well. And I'm wondering for you, in being vulnerable and being so open about topics that are very much taboo, unfortunately, still these days, even though the numbers are very high for all of these things that you've been through. Did you find it therapeutic in any way for like writing through these things?
Absolutely. I think I've always found writing therapeutic. I think, I do, I think of myself as a literary writer. I think of my writing as art. And I think there is some snobbery in the literature world about the idea of writing as therapeutic, but I really don't see those things as contradictory at all. I think catharsis is a way for artists and the people who are consuming the art both to sort of work through any number of things that we're going through in our experience of life. And so I've always processed my feelings and even processed trauma through writing. I talk a lot about my journals in the book, and I actually quote from my journals a lot. It was a really useful primary source to be able to go back and pull from what was I thinking at the time, what was I writing down. And I'm also a writing teacher. I teach at the University of Galway, and I also teach writing workshops online through the Knitting Factory. And I really see over and over how powerful writing is as a tool for catharsis and a tool for healing. And reading too, reading about other people's experiences and recognizing yourself in them has always been a very powerful healing tool for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the idea, and this is something that I've really found is because there's not many books out there that are written for single parents or by single parents that really tell the story. I mean, they're depicted in the media or in certain things, but if you're a single parent reading, you'll know it doesn't touch the sides as to what the reality is.
Right.
So there is something really therapeutic as a single parent to be able to read someone else talk about the isolation, the loneliness, how they know they need the help, but God, they don't want to ask for the help, all these different things, and you just articulate it so well. And it's nice to having written down in words what is sort of wording around your head as a single parent, and you feel like you can't share with anyone else. So I think it's it is a very therapeutic experience, even for the readers. You just kind of feel like that sense of home, like you said, like there's someone else like connected that you can be connected to. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, that was one of my biggest goals for the book, so I'm really glad that it did that for you. So thank you. But that's also one of the Knitting Factory project. So I now live in a historic knitting factory in West Ireland with my son, and I'm also working on turning it into a childcare inclusive retreat space for other single parents. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that is because it is so hard to report on the experience of single parenthood while you're in it, because you have so many other obligations that it is incredibly hard to make time for any kind of creative practice, even though for me, and I know for so many other people, having a creative practice keeps you alive, sustains you, gives you a will to live, and so it is really painful and unfair that this, it can be so hard to make space for that. So my hope is that's what the Knitting Factory does. My sort of slogan for it is making space for single moms to make art, and that I want there to be other people who can talk about who are given the time and space to be able to talk about their experience, because I think people need to hear it. And it is so unfair that, we don't hear more of these voices because they don't have the time to tell their stories, and so that's something that I want the Knitting Factory to be.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. The space for single parents to be able to, And that's what it is. It's just being given the time and space to even think. Because I think so many single parents are so overwhelmed with so many different things. And
Totally.
there's a real sense of loss of yourself when you become
Yes.
a single parent, like a rewriting of your own story and who you
Mhm.
even are.
Yes.
And what one thing that can very quickly fall by the wayside is your passions. They can
Right.
just be, it feels like they're left in your old life and they're not accessible anymore.
Totally.
And sometimes it can feel like you don't have the time, you don't have the energy, or you can just feel guilty. You
Mhm.
can think, well, I should be spending my time on other things. So
Yes.
I think it's such a good reminder that these are still part of you, these things, and you haven't lost them, to pick them back up again.
Absolutely. Well, I used to when I work with parent artists, or artists who are any kind of caregivers, that's a lot of people will come to me for mentoring sessions or come to the writing workshops, and with this sort of sense of mourning that they
Yeah.
don't have space in their lives for creative practice. And something that I learned from single parenthood. So I talk about this in the book, that when I split up with my ex and sort of I was in crisis essentially and things were not great,
Mhm.
and I had had all these sort of aspirations about parenting style, and I had read all these things about birthing styles and like baby food recipes and all of these things. And I really lowered my standards a lot when I became a single parent. And I would, what I started doing is at the end of the day, when I put my baby in his crib for the night, or like until at least the first time he woke up, I would say to myself, okay, have I kept him alive today? If so, I've succeeded, and I've done my job. And so that's what I tell parent artists to do for their creative practice, to say, have I kept it alive today? If so, I've met my goals. So it's not about writing 1,000 words a day or spending an hour painting or anything like that. It's, have I kept it alive today? Have I read a page of a book that I thought was interesting? Have I talked with a friend about a creative idea that I have? And it can be, have I just thought about it for a couple minutes? It can be such a small thing, but it's really just about keeping it alive. And also, like, it's not a baby, so if you don't keep it alive every day, like, don't worry about it, but I think
Fine.
but I think it's a good standard to hold yourself to, that's kinder and that allows you to remember, actually, you are keeping it alive, even if it's not in the way that someone who has the luxury of no caregiving responsibilities does.
Yeah. I absolutely love that idea. Am I keeping it alive today? It's such a simple question. And it doesn't mean that you need to be, producing a chapter of
Right.
a book or whatever your passion is. Just, are you keeping it alive in any way, shape, or form?
Exactly. Yes.
I love that because, yeah, again, it goes back to, it's like the morning of, feeling like you've lost something, but you can
Yeah.
actually revive it and keep it
Right.
alive in other forms. And yes, maybe it won't look like the outlet that you had previously, but you can still keep that alive. And
Exactly.
reminding yourself that this is only a season of your life and you will get that time back
Yes.
and you will be able to revisit it. So keep it live so the distance isn't too long from when you first were doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that concept that this says is just a season of your life seemed so untrue to me when my son was younger. Like, it really did seem like it was going to last forever, and this was just my life forever.
Yeah.
It's really intensive caretaking. And even now that he's 8, it's so different, and I can feel this. I don't have to worry that if I leave him alone in a room for 5 minutes, he's going to swallow an electrical cord or something.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
it's just, it really does. It does change, and you will get that time back. And it's hard. It's really hard to internalize that when you're deep in it, but it is true. Yeah. So you
Yeah.
sustain it until that time comes. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. And yeah, you're right on that point. When you're in it, when you're really in it,
Yeah.
especially when the children are so young and it just feels like it is relentless. And it's
Yeah.
just reminding yourself that there will be pockets of time, you will get that. And
Mhm.
also, as your children get older, I remember when my son would play by himself for 15 minutes, it was like an absolute
Yeah.
gold dust. I was like, this
Everything.
is amazing because you
Totally.
just appreciate it so much. And those times get bigger and bigger. But yeah, for anyone who's got young kids, I think we've both been through it being single parents where
Yeah.
the kids are particularly young. It's hard and it is really challenging, but just know that it will get easier and there is support out there that you
Absolutely.
can get. And then actually speaking of, I want to move on to something I'm really passionate about is empowering single parents to let them know that the best sign of a strong person is someone who knows how to identify what help they need and how to ask for it. It's not a sign of weakness, you're not a burden, it's actually a sign of you know what you are doing and you're empowered. You're not failing. You're not, you're not a sign of you struggling. It's a sign that you got your stuff together because you're actually looking at where you need the help.
Mhm.
So I'd love to know from you, what was your journey with going from becoming a single parent and realizing, and you speak about in the book, realizing actually to make this work, I need to ask for help.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really challenging thing for most people in this day and age. I know certainly in the culture I come from in the U.S., a very sort of individualistic culture where it is often considered a sign of weakness to ask for help. And I think even the structures, the family structures that we aspire to, like the nuclear family, is the suggestion that a family should be a self-contained unit of, two adults and their children, and that they shouldn't need help beyond that. And I think one of the things that I've realized as a single parent is even the nuclear family is not enough. Like you need more than two. Even if you had the best partner in the world, you need more than two people to raise a child. And that the truism about it taking a village is so true. And I think as a single parent, and also it actually reminded me a lot of the formative experiences I had as a queer person. I'm bisexual and I've had a lot of queer community throughout my life, thankfully. And the practice of developing found family that I learned from queer people really was crucial in my sort of in my understanding of the world and the kinds of help that I could ask for, and I understood through example, through my friends, that you can ask people to become your family and you can reciprocate that with them in a way that I didn't really see modeled in the sort of conservative, straight nuclear family structures that I grew up in, and so I think that was a big part of it for me. But also I think when you become a single parent, you kind of, for me, it was less that I decided to ask for help and more that I realized I had to ask for help or my child and I would not survive. And so it really was the shame that I felt about asking for help was superseded by the need to do it. And I still feel that shame. I still, I'm still working on new steps with the project. I still need help with all sorts of things all the time. And it's still hard to ask for it. It's not like I learned how to do it and then it became easy, but I have learned through experience the beauty of it, and that the sort of the releasing of shame is painful, but is always such a relief. And so at least I understand that process more now. And also something interesting that I learned is that there was some study done where it said that one of the best ways to get someone to like you is to ask them for help. And I think that's so interesting. So we actually, and I can feel that, like if someone asks me for help, it does make me like them. It makes me think, oh, this person trusts me. This person is willing to be honest and vulnerable, and it makes me like them more. And so if you remember that for yourself, I think it's really helpful, because don't we all love to help other people, And so like give someone else the chance to help you and feel good about themselves.
Yeah, and that's another point I always make, because like people love to help. It makes people feel good, and yeah, that's so true, because it is a vulnerable thing to ask for help. So if someone's coming to you asking for help, they're being vulnerable, and it is actually quite a connecting thing that you can get from each other.
That's right.
And yeah, it's just reminding yourself all these things when you do, like, even for example, today I needed to have someone pick up my son from school because I got something running later. And even I was like, I had the phone in my hands and I was like, okay, right, who am I going to message? Okay, it's fine. And I had to talk myself down. It's like, it's fine. They don't mind. And like the first person said no. I was like, that's fine. On to the next. I was like, it's okay. And, I didn't feel, it's, and I talk about it all day long as to why everyone needs to ask for help, but it's still something I'm like, there's that barrier that's there. And it's like, okay, it's just going over that barrier and just, doing it anyway, because I needed the help. I mean, otherwise.
Right. No, there was another, a mom friend of mine who's a neighbor, and she, there was like a few months there where she was picking up my kid from school once a week, because I teach at the university once a week. And she was happy to do it, but I always felt so bad that I wasn't reciprocating, And then finally she texted me a few weeks ago. She's like, I'm really sorry, but could you pick up my kid on these days? And I was like, thank God, I can finally reciprocate. So I think, right. And we're creating communities by doing, and even if you think of it as a trade, which it doesn't have to be, like you can give and accept help without reciprocation, but if you think of it as a favor economy, we're creating more and more value for each other the more we do things for each other. And so who wouldn't want that, you know?
Yeah, I think I think it's also especially important if you don't have your family around you. I know you aren't, you know, from
Right.
like the States and you live in Ireland. I'm from Ireland and I live in London, so I don't have my immediate family, so there is no grandparents to
Yeah.
call. So it's even more essential to go above and beyond and push past all the shame.
Mhm.
And then another big theme in your book that I'd love to talk about as well is the circumstances in which you had to leave your relationship and how
Yeah.
this isn't really spoken about. So I was wondering if you want to speak a little bit more about what that journey was for you and kind of what you went through and what it looks like
Sure.
now.
Yeah. So I left my relationship in the context of domestic abuse and specifically emotional abuse. And there will be things I think, you know, there are things that I won't be able to talk about in detail here because I
Yeah.
had to work together with my publisher's legal team about what am and I'm not allowed to say. So you can read the
Yeah.
book to get the most detailed
Yeah.
story. But basically, my ex-husband and I had always agreed that if he ever hit me, I would leave. And I mean, maybe it's kind of weird to even have that agreement in a relationship
Yeah.
in the first place, you know. But we both came from abusive backgrounds, and
Right.
it was something that we talked about a lot. And it is something, funnily enough, that I hear other people say a lot, like, you know, that I'll hear married women say, they'll talk about a bad fight they had and they'll say, oh, but obviously if he ever hit me, I would leave. And so one of my goals for the book was to, and my ex-husband never hit me, you know, but he was very abusive. And and I was very afraid of him, you know, and that's one of the things I wanted the book to do. And, you know, I think as much as it is intimidating to talk about having had this experience, I really wanted to share it with other people in hopes that maybe somebody else would recognize it in their own experience, and that one of the messages of the book would be it is okay to leave even if he doesn't hit you, you know. And I think because I grew up being taught that divorce was such a horrible, sinful thing, and I was very committed to my marriage, and I loved my husband so much. I adored him, and I hope that that comes through in the book as well. And I adored him when I left him, you know. But I think the thing that made me leave was that he was exposing my child to the verbal and emotional abuse and the coercive control, and the idea that my son would grow up with him modeling that and with me modeling acceptance of it was unacceptable to me. And so that I left to save my child from that experience. And looking back, it would be nice to think that I could have left for my own sake, but I also think that that is something a lot of survivors and maybe especially a lot of women have in common, that we will put up with it ourselves, but we end up it's our children that we understand deserve better, and so we deserve better too, but it's harder to say that about ourselves, you know. And so I guess that's, you know, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about was coercive control and emotional abuse and how harmful they can be in kind of insidious ways that are harder to see if someone isn't punching you in the face, you know.
Yeah. No, and I think it's so I think confusing for people who are in that situation because again, it's like, well, I'm not being hit or, you know, it's not
Right.
what people speak about, but something feels off here. And
Mhm.
what I noticed when I was reading the book, which I don't know if this is on purpose or intentional or if it's just how it came out, but as you read it, when you're leaving the relationship, there's not many details about what's kind of happening in terms of like why you're leaving, but you can just there's this sense of you're speaking about you know you need to get out kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then as you get further along and you've got more space away from it, you then pepper the story with like, oh, because this actually is what happened, and give a
Yeah.
detail about incidents, and you'd be like, oh my God, so that's actually what was going on there. And I
Yeah.
wonder, was that actually what it was like for you? Was with the distance you could then admit to yourself and say, you know, that's actually what was happening, but I couldn't even see it at the time.
Absolutely. I think, you know, you said it really well. You said earlier, one of the things about becoming a single parent is rewriting the story of who you are. And that's a big central theme in the book, is I am a writer and I talk about myself as a writer and a storyteller, and that storytelling is how I understand myself and how I understand the world, but I think we all do. And I was telling the story that this man was the love of my life, and that I would, you know, and actually I wish I could remember this woman's name, but I saw a talk another writer who had been through domestic violence, and she said that when she was in the relationship, she didn't think of herself as a battered woman. She thought of herself as a very strong woman who was very much in love with a very troubled man. And I think that that's so true for so many of us, you know. And yeah, so I think there were things that happened that were so stark that I sort of had to confront them. And that was what allowed me to leave. But then after I left, I was able to look back and see the subtler things for actually dangerous, you know, that I didn't understand were dangerous at the time. And that's an ongoing process, I think, for any survivor. The farther away you get from something, I think you have to feel safe in order to look back at a time of unsafety and process it. You know, when you are unsafe, it's not a good survival tactic to focus on those things, you know. And so, yeah, years afterwards, I would look back on something and I remember something. I mean, that happens even now, and I think, oh my God, you know, and I hadn't seen it at the time, you know.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I think, yeah, like I said, you wrote it really well, because it's just it comes so much clearer as you get like towards the end of the book, which is great. And then you also write about, which I think is something that I'm definitely guilty of, when you were at your lowest ebb, things were just like really not going well for you, but you would still look to others and think, well, it's not as bad as them.
Yeah,
so I can't feel bad for myself. So, so it's always thinking like, what, I could be worse, so I can't ask for the help, or you know, I can't complain because at least I have, because you touched on where there was like no housing for you at one point,
right?
And then you had secure accommodation, secure-ish, let's say. But you would be like, well, I have a house, so I can't complain.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I think that's something that a lot of people will resonate with, of this feeling like, even though things are really, really stacked up against them, they're like, but I can't complain because there's...
Yes, I think we're all trained to do that as well. I mean, but like, if that were the case, there would only be one person in the whole world who is allowed to feel bad, you know, and I think like, you know, we can't all be in a competition for whose situation is worse. And I think it's important to be aware, you know, I mean, right, to be aware of the ways in which you are lucky or things are going okay for you. And but saying something is bad isn't the same thing as saying it's worse for me than it is for anyone else, or saying I'm not aware that it's worse for other people or something like that. And that can actually be a tool of control, I think, and my ex used to certainly say that all the time, is like, oh, I could be worse in all of these ways. Or, you know, I mean, I think about that in when I was a teenager and a sort of nascent feminist in the US. And I remember, and again, I grew up in a sort of conservative context. I remember people saying, well, think about women in XYZ countries who don't have all of these rights. You are living in the United States. You have nothing to complain about. And that's actually, I mean, as we can see now, that's not true, you know? And so I think just because something is worse in a certain way somewhere else does not mean that you should accept whatever you are given. I don't think that's ever true. And yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that. But
yeah, I think, no, it's so true. And then another thing as well, I think, for single parents, flipping it the other way, is when maybe you hear friends who are on like traditional family setups who on the surface have more support, maybe they're complaining about their partner, and you can feel that sense of resentment and thinking,
totally,
they've no idea what's going on here. And I think for that, I always think like, everyone's got their circle of stress or what's going on for them, and just because it's not the same as yours doesn't mean that stress for them isn't big and isn't warranted. And I think it can be hard to get to that point as a single parent when you're surrounded, where you do feel like hard done by, and other people complaining about things you'd be desperate to have.
Oh my God.
By yourself, they're just trying to share that they're going through something hard, and while it's maybe something that you can't resonate with, you can resonate with the fact that they're going through something hard.
Totally. Oh, I remember another single mom telling me about how her parents had helped her buy a house, and she was like annoyed at how often they wanted to babysit her kid. And like, I mean, I'm sure, but I had a really hard time being sympathetic to that.
Yeah, I was like, I'm really struggling to get here,
right.
but okay.
I mean, but you know, I think we all have been on both sides of that coin, and I think it's important to hold grace for each other in any ways we can. A really good piece of advice I got about sort of about who to vent about your problems to is this sort of concentric circles of how much they're affected by them. So like, you know, if your spouse has cancer, you know, and you don't complain to your spouse about how hard that is for you, because they're the person at the center of that circle. They're the person affected the most by it. But you could talk to your sister about it, because even, their brother-in-law having cancer is painful for them, but not as painful as it is for you. And so I think that has been really helpful for me. Like, I wouldn't talk about money troubles with someone I know has less money than I do. I wouldn't complain about renovation with somebody who's struggling to find a rental, I think. And so that is a helpful barometer for me to figure out. But I actually think, going back to the asking for help, if we think about it, like, venting to your friends about your problems is one thing, and you should think about who you're doing it to, in what context. But when you are asking for help, I think you can ask anybody, because it's different than complaining. And that is, I think it's an important distinction that we don't always make in either the culture I grew up in the US, or here in Ireland, that it actually is, it feels quite different to talk about a problem and to ask for help with that problem. And people also receive it quite differently,
Yeah. And also, I think it's sometimes you just want to complain, and then people jump in to help, and you're like, I don't need solutions to this. I just need a space to speak about it. And then the idea of speaking to people who are kind of in the circle that would understand your needs, I love that idea. But for many people, when they become a single parent, they look around and they're like, well, no one else is a single parent. What do I do now? And I love, in your story, you met with the COPE group and the connections you made there. And do you want to talk just a little bit about that group? And also, in particular, you can talk about a woman who is 80 as well, because that story was inspiring. So
I'm so glad.
Yeah,
I think about her all the time. So COPE is the domestic abuse center in Galway. And one of the things I really want people to get out of the book is, if they have any doubts about their relationship, to contact their local domestic violence center. I was referred to COPE so basically, to make a long story short, after my son was born, my ex kept telling me I had postpartum anxiety. I went to my GP to ask if I did. She said it sounded like we actually needed marriage counseling. So we went to marriage counseling, and the marriage counselor, thank God, told us that we shouldn't be in marriage counseling. That this was a case of severe emotional abuse, and she referred my ex to an abuser rehabilitation group and referred me to COPE, to the local domestic violence center. And there I met my incredible support worker who saved my life and my son's, I'm convinced. And she also brought me into a survivors group once I had left the relationship. And so this was a group of other women who had been through domestic abuse. And I was, at first, thought I didn't qualify for the group, again, because my husband never hit me. But for most of the women, that was also the case. It was a lot of the times emotional abuse, coercive control, verbal abuse, things like that. And the first time that I went to this group, I met, it was a very diverse group of women from all kinds of different backgrounds, all different ages. I was probably the youngest one there. I was 30 at the time. And the oldest woman was in her 80s. And she had just left a 60-year marriage. And her children were very angry at her for leaving, but she said she didn't want to live the rest of her life being afraid in her own home. And she had also bought her own car for the first time in her life. And I'm going to cry thinking about it, but she looked around at us, and she said that she wished she was as brave as we were to have left so much earlier than she did. And I just immediately thought, and I could tell all the other women were thinking it too, like, none of us are as brave as her. Like, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done to leave a 5-year marriage. I can't imagine being married to someone for 60 years. Like, I felt like I had to chew off a limb that was in a bear trap just to one I'd been with for 5 years. And the amount of courage it takes to leave someone you've been with for 60 years to say, however long the rest of my life is, I don't want to spend it afraid in my own home, is just remarkable, Yeah.
No, it really is. Not, yeah, I love that, where she was, applauding all of you, and he was looking back at her. No, it's like, what you've done is, and to hold on to those last few years of your life and know that you can live them free. I think it's incredible.
But it goes back to what you were saying. Like, I think everybody looks at other people and thinks, oh, I have it better than they did, but it's not necessarily true,
I know. You just never know. And then, so you kind of mentioned a little bit about the knitting factory, but I just want to hear more about how does it work? What stage are you at with it? Like, what's going on with the knitting factory?
Yeah, it's actually, I have very recent news about that, so it's exciting. But so the Knitting Factory is a historic building in Connemara in West Ireland. It was built in 1906 as a knitting factory, as the name would suggest. Over the years, it was the world's first Irish language cinema in the 1970s. It was a jewelry making studio in the 1990s. But by the time I got to it, it was a sort of little used vacation home. And it was the weird old building that no one else wanted, that I had been fantasizing about writing a book about. It had been on the market for several years without a sale. And so I managed to convince the very kind and patient owner, Patrick, that I wanted to rent to own while I tried to raise the funds to buy the building. And the whole second half of my book is the story of how I managed to do that absolutely by the skin of my teeth. It came so close to not working. And it was only through this sort of miracle that I would not have even put in a novel that it worked at all. But so
Wait, can I pause? It wasn't a miracle. You
thank you.
really grafted on it. You tried
I tried really hard. I worked really hard. Yes.
Yeah. That's not a miracle. That like you worked at this. But anyway, go on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate. I think it's still hard for me to, I think so. Thank you. And yes, I did. I worked really hard and I did not give up, and that is why it worked as well.
Yeah.
I think something that I think about a lot is I think most single mothers play every card they have, and I played every card I had. And it happens to be that one of the cards I could play is that I went to some really good schools in the US that have really solid alumni communities, and a lot of the people in those communities have funds to give to crowdfunding projects, and that is a card that a lot of other single mothers don't have and can't play. So I had that card, but I did also play it well. So I think both those are true.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I did get to buy the house, and but it took absolutely all the money I had and all the money I could raise from everyone else. And so I've been sort of scraping along. I've done one funded residency per year since then, and I've always wanted to do more, but it's been hard. It's an old weird building that has been in desperate need of renovation since we moved in. But I just yesterday finalized an agreement with another alum of Smith, the women's college that I went to, who is giving me a private mortgage so that I can do major renovations at the Knitting Factory, which is huge. And so we're going to be starting those renovations. They're hopefully going to be complete sometime in the winter, and then I'm going to open full time in the spring, and I'll be able to start out doing 4 funded residencies a year. And once renovations are paid off, I'll be able to do even more, which is incredible. So basically the philosophy behind the Knitting Factory, it is a family home for myself and my kid, and it is also a residency space. So my original vision was that it would be for arts residencies for single parent artists. But over the course of the book, I came to realize that the thing that single parents need long before they need time to make art is just time to rest. And so the residencies that I've done so far are rest residencies. You do not need to be an artist to apply. You just need to be a single parent who needs some rest, because like, who does not, And so that is what the space is for. And then it is also going to be available for paid residencies that will support the expenses that go into renovations and running the building, and will subsidize the free residencies. I am also working on planning group retreats. And then there are these online writing classes and workshops, which are always free for single parents. And all of that is also supported by monthly subscribers on Patreon. And that has actually become the sort of central monetary support that the Knitting Factory has, is Patreon subscribers. And so that's been incredible.
Yeah, amazing. What a fantastic initiative. And I just think even just the idea of somewhere to go and rest as a single parent.
That's what we all like. I think all along it's been what do I need? I think that's it's a peer-to-peer thing, is I think what I need myself, and that's what I want.
Just the rest. Because even I remember this is like within the first year of my son, when I became a single parent, and my son was at dad's for the weekend, and I got laser eye surgery. And for laser eye surgery, you basically have to lie in a room for 2 days afterwards and like do nothing. And everyone's like, oh my God, what are you going to do? And I was like, I'm going to lie in a room for 2 days and do nothing. I was like, I can't wait. I was like, I need help. Do you want me to do it? I was like, no. I was like, 2 days, lie in bed. Oh my God. I almost look back my best weekend ever.
Yeah,
I loved it. Yeah, so that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to know from you, What is your favorite thing about being a single parent?
Ooh, that's such a great question. Um, it might be a terrible answer. I really like not having to compromise with anyone about how to raise my kid. So I am a 24/7. I actually I do prefer this term single parent to solo parent, but
Yeah.
I am a 24/7 single parent. I do not have to compromise with anybody about where my kid goes to school, what household rules are, things like that. It turns out I really like being the supreme dictator of my household. So and I also, I mean, that's the first thing I always think of. I like the idea that I can move wherever I want when my kid grows up. Like I was very much hopeless romantic when I was younger, but I take a lot of pleasure in directing my own life now and getting to choose what the shape of my life is. And I do have romance in my life now, but it because that does not force me to reshape how I want my life to look on a daily basis or in the long term. And that's become something that's really important to me. My other answer to that, actually, now that I think about it, is I'm really close with my kid and I really love that. I think we have a very strong relationship that I think, single parenting really gives you. Like you are their person and he's like I just think he's awesome and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's that bond that you get when it's just that kind of one-on-one time, especially if there's just
exactly.
what I also just have one as well. So it
Yeah.
really is like very
It's
one-on-one.
very nice. Yeah.
It's intense, but yeah, you do really get to like know each other, be each other's people, which is just
Yeah,
the nicest feeling.
totally.
And obviously you've been on a journey and you've worked on this amazing project.
Mhm.
I'd love to know what advice would you have for any single parents out there who have an idea and they have it, they've dreamt it up in their heads, they can see it, but they just don't know where to start, or they're just thinking, Now's not the time." What
Right.
advice would you have for them?
I think to talk to people about it. I think sometimes, and I see this when I work with writers who have an idea for a book and they feel like they shouldn't tell anybody about their idea because maybe someone else will take it. And
Mhm.
it's really not the case. And we could get into how that's super not the case in publishing, but that's not the point. But I one of the biggest gifts of the Knitting Factory is that I followed this idea that came from my heart, that was so central to who I have become. Um, it is the work of my heart, and talking about it directed the right people towards it, and you can only find those people by sharing about it, and this project literally would not have worked without all the help I've received from other people. And a lot of them are single parents or people who've had experience of single parenthood, or they're the grown-up children of single parents. That's been one of the most moving parts of this whole thing for me, is seeing
Yeah.
how many people who grew up with single moms are passionate about this project because they wish there had been more support for their mom. And like even the fact that they feel that way and that they do understand what their mom went through and they appreciate it, like that is so moving to me. And so I think if you have an idea, talking about it, sharing about it, trying to be the opposite of secretive about it whenever you can, will draw the right people in to help you.
Yeah, speak it into existence.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and
Like if it's not the time for it, that's okay too. Like if you really feel like it's, like you were saying earlier, everything is a season. So it's okay. It's okay if you can't do everything right now, but things will come. I think that's important too.
yeah, like let's like you have a lot on your plate, so
Right.
so
Yeah.
one hour at a time, not even one
Right.
day, 1 hour
Yeah.
at a
Keep it
time.
alive. Like, right. 1 minute at a time. Like,
Yeah.
so.
And then what parting advice then would you have for someone who maybe is just the very early stages of leaving a relationship and they don't know what the path ahead looks like for them. They feel like, their script has totally been ripped up and thrown out and they just don't know what's ahead of them. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the sort of facile answer would be that it gets easier, and it does. But I think maybe what I would say is to notice just the little moments when things feel okay, and just to try to notice them. And for me, what that noticing looked like was journaling, was sort of just writing down in my journal, just for myself, not to make it sound pretty or to be published or anything. But what is my kid doing today that I thought was really sweet? And because in the fog of early single parenting, there are a lot of things you won't remember. And so I think to try to notice when even just a little moment when when something is lovely and hold on to it in some way, take a picture of it, write a note about it to yourself or something. Because I think what you pay attention to becomes the story that you're telling yourself about your life, and that's an important thing to do. And also that'll be really precious to you later. Like, I'm so grateful that I wrote down, my kid, when he runs around, he makes this jiggly noise, like, I would not have remembered that, from when he was months old. And I do now because I have it in my journal. And I'm working on a project with Cope now, possibly, on developing a collection of little micro essays from single parents called The First Time I Felt Free. And it's, again, specifically about the context of domestic abuse, obviously, but a lot of single parents that I talk to have a moment after they leave their relationship that was the first moment they felt free, and like where you're driving the moving van down the highway, or you're hanging up a picture in your house that your ex never let you hang up because he didn't like it, or you spend an evening after your kid goes to bed watching the TV show you want to watch or something, and just those little moments to notice them, I think, is actually really crucial.
Yeah, because it can feel so heavy in the early days and so just heavy. And yeah, it's noticing those small moments, I think, is key. And I think you're right, because then also it means when you look back, you will remember there was those small moments that you remembered. Because there is a lot going on. There's no denying it. There's seismic shifts happening in your life, but notice the small things. And the best thing about it is you have your kids who will always bring a lot of hassle. Yes. They will always bring the joy. There will always be a joy from them, which is, and hang on to that is,
right. Well, I think, now that you say that, the thing that I most wish I could say to myself from those first months, and I talk about this in the end of the book as well, I like all the things that I was sort of torturing myself about, that I felt guilty about. I would tell myself not to worry about it. I would say, you are surviving. You're doing a great job. Try to be kind to yourself. That is the one thing I would say to myself if I could, So
because the sooner you're kinder to yourself, the sooner you can just start moving on and building your life again. Amazing. Okay, Betsy, any parting words? Where can people find more about you? Anything else that's coming up for you? Please share.
Sure, thank you. So my memoir is called Ring of Salt, a memoir of finding home and hope on the wild coast of Ireland. I'm Betsy Cornwell. It is coming out September 30th in the US and October 9th in the UK and Ireland. Pre-orders are one of the best things you can do for any author. So if you would be up for ordering it from your local bookshop before it comes out, that would be incredible. You can find more about the Knitting Factory project and even subscribe to our Patreon, which would be an incredible support. Subscriptions start at €2 a month, and you get stickers and tote bags and all kinds of things. And that's all at oldknittingfactory.com.
Amazing. Well, Betsy, thank you. And also, can I just say, the book, if you haven't, you maybe haven't heard about it because you're listening to this now. So I'm telling you, it is amazing. Get it, read it. It's not just about the journey of single parenthood. There's so many other themes in there that we haven't even touched on that I really, really enjoyed as well. So get out there, pre-order it, and support this amazing book. And let's raise the story up a bit more, which is, much needed to be heard. Betsy, thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm sure you can agree that Betsy did not disappoint as a podcast guest. What an incredible story. What an incredible woman. She's amazing. So go check her out, The Old Knitting Factory. Their memoir comes out, Ring of Salt, in September. Make sure you buy it. If not, pre-order it now, because honestly, I've read it. I love it. I'm obsessed with it. And as I said in the podcast, you could go back to it time and time again because it is brilliant. And if you have been affected by any of the issues that we raised in the podcast today, I'm going to add some links into the show notes of places that you can go to for support. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Single Parent Reset. If you're interested in working with me one-to-one, please go to my website, solacecoaching.com, for further details. And don't forget to follow my Instagram page at Solace Coaching for more insightful content on living a life to be proud of as a single parent. As always, if you find this episode useful, please share with your friends and family. Remember, many single parents may seem like they have it all together, but this could be exactly what they need to help them move forward today.